This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Africa with insight into Africa's ever-changing landscape. I'm Hannah Viviers. I'm going to be with you for the next hour. Let's take a look at what happened on the markets today. Well, time now for a quick look at the markets. South Africa's JSE losing that momentum, and it just started to gain in the latter part of the week. As recently as yesterday, the JSE had escaped some of the global sell-off we've been seeing, slump stock due to heightened concern of the coronavirus impact on global economic growth. Today, as we can see on the board, all the indices we track here not being able to shake up those concerns. That's a quick look at the markets. Here are some more stories that are making headlines this hour. Ethiopia announces a new investment law to transform its economy. In just a few hours, the UK will no longer be a member of the European Union. And rice farming overtakes plantain as the main crop grown in central Uganda. Ethiopia has signed into law a new investment regulation in an effort to transform its economy and drive progress toward a middle-income status. The country will not open up its banking and insurance firms to foreign ownership, though. That's despite paving the way for overseas investors to buy into other sectors of its economy. The law states that the banking, insurance, microcredit, and micro-saving services will be reserved for domestic investors. The new regulation is aimed at producing a framework that boosts global competitiveness of the economy, increases export performance, and generates better employment opportunities. Well, to give us more details on that story, Koleta Wanjohi now joins us live from Addis Ababa. Koleta, thank you so much for joining us. For foreign investors who have been looking and eyeing Ethiopia, this is great news. But some may be asking why the financial services sector will essentially remain closed to foreign investment.
Well, Hannah, thank you very much. And I think Ethiopia is trying to play a bit safe because we know that as part of the economic reforms since the coming into power of the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, he has tried to open up some sectors to to private investment. Foreign investment. We've seen the telecom sector, sugar corporation, the energy sector, and all that. But the banking sector, with specific reference to that, and also the microfinance institutions, are truly, like someone would describe them, are truly owned by Ethiopians, run by Ethiopians over time. They've never really had any foreign investment into that. And some people hold some of these institutions with a lot of passion, because we know some people bank in some regional banks because they come from that area. So there is a certain attachment to people, and in terms of investment, in terms of support of these financial institutions. So most probably the government is taking it a bit slow to see how the opening up of other sectors will look like before it tackles the banking sector and the other financial sectors, if it will come to that. But now what we're seeing the banking sector and other financial sectors doing is modernization, and that's something that the Minister of Finance and the government is encouraging, to try and modernize and make the systems much more modern and easier for the people.
Koleta, just speak to us about what some of the factors are that you see that make Ethiopia an attractive investment destination.
Well, if you look at the location of Ethiopia, its proximity to the Middle East and its markets, that makes it very important for anyone who's looking to do export and to do big-scale business here. And also, if you look at its neighbors, we've got Kenya on one side, Somalia, Djibouti on one side. So there's all this market, not also talking about the market within the country of about 100 million people. So that's really attractive. But also recently, with the peace deal between Ethiopia and Eritrea, that opens other prospects for using the ports in Eritrea, which will make business even cheaper, because the distance between the ports in Eritrea to here compared to the ones from Djibouti up to here is a bit shorter if you use the Eritrea ones. So if the deals between Ethiopia and Eritrea go very well and Ethiopia starts using that port, it will be cheaper for the business people. But also looking at the fact that a big population offers great market, offers affordable labor and all that. So all that makes Ethiopia really an investment, a good investment climate. And also remember, Ethiopia is talking about industrialization. It has now built about 13 industrial parks, which is opening up. It's opening up to other foreigners. So all this is really, really interesting for foreign market.
Coletta, with all those positives, why would what are some of the reasons that you can see that investors might be wary about investing in Ethiopia, despite some of the sectors being opened up and despite a lot of the positives that you've highlighted just now?
Well, if you look clearly, sorry, the wind is a bit dry here. I'm tearing on one, yeah. So, but if you look at the situation in Ethiopia, one of the biggest issue is the issue of foreign exchange shortage. This is something that people have complained. People who have set up businesses here, they say accessing foreign exchange is quite a big problem, and that also impacts a lot in terms of importation because you need foreign exchange. So you have some people have to wait for a long time to have their goods coming in. But also, if you look at other situations, I mean, other people have complained that for those who are investing here, for example, the airlines, repatriation of currency back home, back to their home countries is such a big issue. And also we have issues of bureaucracy. We have also other issues of customs clearance being very slow. So all this, and to top it up, we've seen a lot of internal conflict, which is a bit destabilizing in terms of the political space. And that kind of scares away people who wanted to either, expand their investment or people who wanted to really start a new investment.
Coletta, thank you so much for joining us. Coletta Wanjohi joining us live from Addis Ababa. Well, the African Development Bank has launched the 2020 edition of its flagship African Economic Outlook report in Cote d'Ivoire. It says it lays out sectors that would be key in the continent's economic growth agenda. The theme for this year's report is developing Africa's workforce for the future. CGTN's Beryl Oro has more on that story.
During the launch of the 2020 Africa Economic Outlook report, the Africa Development Bank president said that the report would provide short and medium-term forecast on major economic indicators in Africa, such as growth, poverty and employment.
The growth rate varies greatly among several African countries. In Cote d'Ivoire, the government has made a great effort because the growth rate is 7.4%. But there are other African countries with very low growth rates. It is therefore necessary to work on regional integration so that all African countries can participate in the growth of the continent.
The report also flagged the need for reforms in the education sector so as to boost capacity among youth seeking employment.
Africa has to invest more in human capital. That means we have to do more for education. We have to do more for skills so our young people can have the capacity to be able to get jobs. And we also have to look that we do what Africa 2063, and we have to follow the guidelines there so that all of our countries can do better.
The lowest and the highest poverty rates in Africa were not revealed at this meeting. However, the Africa Development Bank president emphasized that Africa's economic outlook continues to improve.
Growth is indeed something very important, but in reality, the population cannot feed off the GDP. It is therefore necessary to increase the number of people who have access to medical care, education, different financing, employment, etc. So in other words, African governments must work to ensure that growth goes hand in hand with improving the quality of life of the population.
If we have to attain Objective 2030 of the UN, if we have to attain the AU's Agenda of 2063, the 4 key areas that we have to focus on, we have to finance African female-owned businesses. We also have to invest in the digital space because the internet is wealth in our hands, depends on how we use it. You know, we have to digitalize our economies, our educational system, digitalize, the financial sector. And then we also have to invest in infrastructure. We cannot be talking on improving education when we don't have proper school setups, we don't have viable teachers that can actually transmit the skills to the Africa's workforce that we want to prepare against 2030. And then the last thing is we need political stability in order for us to check all these boxes.
Every year, about 12 million young graduates leave African universities with no job prospects. To address this, the Africa Development Bank has launched an employment promotion initiative to support the creation of 25 million jobs over the next 10 years in Africa. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Time now to take a look at your corporate headlines. In South Africa, Eskom's new chief executive, Andrew de Ruyter, says he is in the process of appointing a new board. This is for the State Power Utilities Plan division into units for generation, transmission and distribution. Eskom, which produces more than 90% of South Africa's electricity, is hamstrung by debt of around $31.4 billion. Well, still in South Africa, sugar producer Tongaat Hulett reported a smaller half-year interim loss on Friday. Headline loss per share for the first 6 months ending in September came in at 235 cents. That's compared to a loss of 322 cents for the same period a year earlier. The scandal-hit firm, which produces a range of sugarcane and maize-based products, says it is making progress in cutting debt and improving cash flow. Well, Kenya's East African Breweries has posted a 9% jump in pre-tax profit. It's up to $105.2 million for its first half to the end of December. The company also reported a 10% rise in net sales. That increase has been attributed to growth in mainstream spirits and Scotch whiskey, as well as its low-priced Senator keg beer. And finally, German multinational conglomerate ThyssenKrupp says bidders for its price elevator division value the unit at more than $16.6 billion, according to its chief executive, Martina Merz. A decision on the deal is expected by the end of February. The proceeds would be used to fix the group's balance sheet and to develop its other struggling units. And those were your corporate headlines. Well, let's now take a look at more news that's making headlines this hour. As the UK leaves the EU, we'll look at what impact that could have on African markets. And MTN tries its hand once again at a mobile banking service in South Africa.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidoo. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Well, as Britain leaves the EU, there is no certainty as to what impact it could have on African economies or the future of relations between the UK and Africa. Some experts say the resulting volatility could have a serious effect on Africa's economies. Others believe it's probably premature to press a panic button just yet. Uche Okoronkwo examines what's at stake for the African continent.
Britain is about to make history as the first country to leave the EU. Like many Britons, the future remains ambiguous for Africa. Will this add salt to the wounds of already injured economies or turn into a win for the continent? Well, the consensus amongst economic experts seems to be that the only thing certain about Africa in a post-Brexit world is the uncertainty. So much that happens in the UK has a direct impact on trade, investment and aid to Africa. The future of trade between the two post-Brexit is by far the biggest concern. Trade with the UK has already dwindled, falling from 4.2% in 2012 to just 2% or $46 billion in 2018. Because most trade arrangements were negotiated through the EU, they may cease to apply or will have to be renegotiated when the UK finally leaves. The reality is, new trade arrangements often take considerable time to hash out, during which time trade volumes could decrease, complicating Africa's exports to the UK. The intense political uncertainty in the UK has also led to its worst year for growth. Economic forecasts show that it's on course to post zero growth in the fourth quarter of 2019. As the UK's economy feels the effect of Brexit, the demand for commodities and other natural resources, such as copper, iron ore and crude oil, may fall, further slowing growth in heavily resource-dependent African nations. For example, the UK is South Africa's 8th largest import and export market. Experts are already predicting that South Africa's GDP could shrink by 0.1% as a result of potentially weaker trade and investment ties with the UK, which could in turn mean the loss of jobs. A limping British economy raises another question mark about the current level of aid to countries such as Ethiopia and Sierra Leone, which rely heavily on British aid. The UK is one of the largest contributors to the European Development Fund, which has supported great projects on the continent. It has also pledged 0.7% of its gross national income to development aid. The fear is capital inflows may shrink if the UK rolls back that funding. If the UK also goes into recession and its GNI falls, that reduces the amount of money for aid in real terms. For Africa, a changing attitude to aid could also emerge within a Britain-less European Union. An inaugural UK-Africa Investment Summit in London this year did open the door for a new era of ties between Africa and Britain. Hosted by British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, a total of 27 deals worth an estimated $8.5 billion were signed. Also, pledges for $1.9 billion worth of initiatives targeting private sector investments in infrastructure projects in nations such as Egypt, Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, and Uganda were made. Experts say what happens next is a game of ifs and maybes. The UK may simply keep the same trade deals with its African partners for the foreseeable future. Its exit from the EU could also be an opportunity for African nations to upgrade EU-Africa relations. But they also say African governments now need to focus on redefining trade and diplomatic relations with a post-Brexit Britain, relations that are now more beneficial. Uche Okoronkwo, CGTN.
Well, Zimbabwe's government and civil servant representatives have finally struck a deal to raise minimum wages. The agreement hopes to avert further industrial action and end months of negotiation. CGTN's Farai Makotia has this report.
The Apex Council, an umbrella body of unions representing state employees, agreed to a deal that will see the lowest paid government worker receiving an increment of 139%, raising their salaries to 2,500 Zimbabwe dollars, the equivalent of about $150 per month. Civil servants had threatened to go on strike over low wages eroded by galloping inflation, whose annual rate is estimated to be over 500%. Despite periodic cushioning allowances meant to mitigate the escalating cost of living, public servants insisted they could not get by, with some, including teachers and nurses, reporting for duty just 2 days a week. Ordinary citizens who hope normalcy will now be restored to some services that had been disrupted have welcomed the agreement. However, the increase is likely to place an additional burden on Treasury, which had been warned by the IMF, amongst others, against unsustainable increments which are likely to derail cost-cutting reforms. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
MTN is once again attempting to offer a mobile banking service in South Africa. The African mobile giant tried twice before in the last decade, but failed to gain momentum. It could be third time lucky for MTN's latest offering, Momo. CGTN's Sumitra Naidu tells us more.
Yellow, everybody. Yellow team Momo.
MTN relaunched its mobile banking service Momo this week amid much excitement. It first launched Momo in 2012 but had to shut it down in 2016 after it failed to attract enough customers.
Our research showed us that even though South Africa has got quite a high level of banking, probably the highest in Africa, still a large part of the South African population has access to banking, but they don't use it effectively. What we're trying to do is we're trying to bring the services closer to the people.
Over 11 million South Africans don't have any bank accounts. Many of these people can't access the infrastructure because they live in outlying rural areas, and others simply can't afford to bank. MTN is hoping to bridge this gap.
There are no monthly fees to using the service, and it is very cost effective. The whole idea behind mobile money, it will help ease the burden of cash.
Research shows that more South Africans have mobile phones and bank accounts. MTN has partnered with Ubank on this project.
We have made a deliberate decision to make it accessible to anybody on any network with any phone to actually use the service. The whole concept and the whole idea around empowerment was very big, and access is very big. We would not be able to achieve that if we're still trying to put barriers. So we have opened this up to everybody with a cell phone.
Cost, trust and functionality are important factors for South African customers. In 2016, Vodacom also stopped M-Pesa because it wasn't attracting enough customers. Yet M-Pesa is the #1 banking service in every other African country that it's available. MTN Momo is also in 15 other African countries, some operating for over 10 years.
The difference is South Africa's rules and regulations. According to the Reserve Bank, any mobile operator wanting to offer a financial service must partner with a commercial bank. Now, tying a mobile company together with a financial institution may not be ideal. MTN tried with Standard Bank, but that didn't last too long. It is determined, though, to try again. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
The impact of the coronavirus outbreak occurring in China is being felt as far away as Cape Town in South Africa. Officials are concerned that it's already beginning to have a negative impact on the local economy. The mother city has particularly enjoyed a spike in growth by Chinese leisure travelers, but those numbers are trickling down during the summer season. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more.
It's news that many have feared. The coronavirus outbreak in China has been declared a global health emergency, which has placed severe travel restrictions in and out of China. Officials here are particularly concerned about the immediate impact it's having on the local economy. The tourism sector has already seen mass cancellations from Chinese tour groups, which is a major blow for the city.
It will have an impact. We've seen double-digit growth in the forward bookings into Cape Town for the period December to March from a number of our key source markets, including China. Cape Town International Airport have also shown some very encouraging increases in the number of arrivals if we compare year to year. And so we are concerned that it will have an impact in terms of the ability of people to travel from an important key source market such as China.
But business travel from China is also restricted, denting the city's plan to keep the momentum going on inbound investment opportunities that they've been working on for years now.
We currently are in discussions with a number of Chinese companies that have indicated their willingness to invest in Cape Town. And so my team is doing everything possible to continue with those discussions so that we can proceed on the investment facilitation and not let these incidents give such a big impact if we can try and mitigate.
An impact it's having though, which could even lead to job losses. But business stakeholders are hoping the situation can improve.
I do think it's encouraging to see the steps that have been taken by the authorities both in China and in the global multilateral level. It seems to me that there are the steps being put in place to contain the spread, and hopefully we can get back to a position quite soon where the Chinese traveller is the priority market for a place like the Cape to grow into that enormous travelling market, as opposed to now where there are increasingly restrictions and where we're perhaps not going to see the growth that we were anticipating in Chinese arrivals.
It seems then the pressure will continue to bear down on the local tourism industry, who've had to deal with the impact Ebola, the drought and the energy crisis has had on their businesses. And now with the coronavirus, many may be thinking just what exactly could be next. There remains very many questions, but not many answers. Authorities here are taking a wait-and-see approach for the time being, but are hoping Chinese health officials will deal the coronavirus a fatal blow as soon as possible. Ramsdale News, CGTN, Cape Town.
Time for us to take a short break and return. In just a few hours, the UK will no longer be a member of the European Union. And Miami is hoping to cash in as an NFL Super Bowl returns to South Florida for the first time in 10 years.
Holding guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
The Excellency, thank you very much for your time now. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Economic data out of the country.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Uche Okoronkwo reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Welcome back. Well, the 3.5 years of Brexit struggle is finally over. Although a few other dates have come and gone, the UK will become the first ever country to leave the European Union this Friday at 2300 GMT. However, that doesn't mean things will change overnight. CGTN's Richard Bestick explains why.
The clock really is now ticking down on those moments before Britain departs the European Union after 40 years of membership. It really has been a crazy 3.5 years since the referendum in 2016, largely driven by slogans. We've had Brexit means Brexit. We've had a soft Brexit, a hard Brexit, and one Prime Minister even tried to give us a red, white and blue Brexit. The Labour opposition in Britain was selling a jobs first Brexit. But then in the general election, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson came up with the idea of let's get Brexit done. And for a population weary of 3 years of battling over Brexit, it resonated. And he won what he called a stonking majority in Parliament. It gave him the powers to force through Brexit, and Britain now will be leaving. We know that for sure. The European Union's Parliament played its part endorsing Boris Johnson's legislation, giving their backing to Britain's departure from the European Union. And then, bursting into song, there was waving of scarves with United Forever, and speeches saying that if Britain ever changed its mind, it would be welcomed back into the European fold. Not quite sure how sincere that gesture was. The Brexit Party, which ironically has held seats in the European Parliament in one guise or another for more than 20 years, hurled one last insult at the European Union, saying, "We hate you." They waved Union Jack flags and then left the chamber of the European Parliament en masse. But here's the thing. However much Boris Johnson argues that he's getting Brexit done, the reality is that in the year ahead lie the most difficult negotiations, forming Britain's future relationship with that giant trading bloc on its doorstep and its 500 million consumers. That will be the difficult bit. Some say it'll make the last 3.5 years look easy. Richard Bestick, CGTN, London.
We're staying with Brexit, and joining us live now from London is Nawid Jabarkal. Nawid, earlier on we had seen people, well, some people celebrating Brexit finally happening today. What is the general mood of people there at the moment?
Yeah, the rain's starting to come down here in the last half an hour or so in London, but the mood has been fairly subdued across, not just here in Westminster, but across the country today as well. And that's because this is an issue that's divided this country, not just politically, but it's been something that's divided people at their dinner tables or at workplaces and really all across the country. 17 million people voting to leave the European Union in that referendum, 16 million people roughly choosing to stay in the European Union. And what we've seen with the political debate in this country over the past 3.5 years, not just in Parliament, which you can see behind me, but also elsewhere, has been some of those divisions become entrenched. That's something that Boris Johnson wants to change tonight. 11 p.m. GMT, in a few hours' time, Britain will be leaving the European Union. Ahead of that, Boris Johnson is going to address the nation in a televised address where he'll call for unity. He'll say that this is a moment of national renewal and really an opportunity for Britain to start to chart its own future in a globalised world. But it will be a tough sell because the divisions that we've seen in the past few years are going to take perhaps a lot longer to bring together, because there will be some people celebrating today, some people very sad that Britain will be leaving after almost 50 years of being inside the European Union. And we've seen out on the streets as well some protests supporting Brexit today here in London, across the country, even up in Scotland as well. Some protesters choosing to go out onto the street to say that they're against this decision. So it's still a real challenge for Boris Johnson in terms of how he's going to bring this country together, Hannah.
Nawid, it has seemed as though uncertainty was a major concern for many individuals and even businesses. What is the Prime Minister saying is the way forward from here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, he's trying to focus on unity, but also opportunity is another factor that he's going to be mentioning in his speech later today, saying that this is the most important thing. He'll say, according to him, is that this is not the end, but the beginning, a beginning for a new course, a new chapter in Britain's history. And that's an important one because Britain, for the first time, will be able to start talking trade, start talking business with countries all around the world, which it hasn't been able to do over the past 47 years. But in terms of uncertainty, I think that's going to continue. What happens after 11 p.m. GMT tonight is we enter something called the transition period. That's when the two sides, up until the end of this year, will try to work out a free trade deal. Boris Johnson thinks that it can be done in 11 months, although there is a lot to thrash out, really, from immigration to fishing to all sorts, which Boris Johnson says can be done, but a lot of people are quite sceptical about that. And the uncertainty that's causing is it may not cause people to be impacted straight away, but businesses certainly are still putting off decisions. We've seen the British economy almost paralysed in recent years, certainly slowed down. And for businesses, at least, that uncertainty looks like it's going to continue unless we see any major movement on the trade deal, as we were hearing from Richard in his report.
Nawid, one of the things that I would imagine is that people would want this to happen quickly because, I mean, 3.5 years of negotiations that have been taking place for us to just get to this point. Just speak to us a little bit about that, about how people are looking this might turn out for the rest of the year.
Yeah, it's really crucial, this. Britain will be leaving the European Union. Boris Johnson ran in that election last month and won a huge mandate, it must be said. A majority of 80 lawmakers he now has in Parliament, so he can really essentially do what he wants in the chambers and green seats behind me. But what that's also meant is that there's going to be some tough decisions in the months that come ahead. Once Britain formally leaves, the two sides need to work out a trade deal on how they're going to go forward. The European Union has already said 11 months isn't enough time to to do that. There's just simply too much to try and detangle, if you will. 47 years of a relationship, all that regulation, all that close alignment. How are you going to try and do that in 11 months? The Europeans don't think it can be done. Many analysts don't think it can be done as well. But Boris Johnson certainly confident that it can be. The clock, as soon as 11 p.m. when Britain leaves the European Union formally, will enter the transition period. But the clock starts ticking, Hannah, on this other deadline, the end of the year, for the two sides to thrash out a trade deal.
Well, Naweed, it looks like as though it's going to be one of those things where it's just going to be time is going to tell what's going to happen with that. Thank you so much for joining us. Naweed Jabakal joining us live from London. Well, the World Health Organization has declared the coronavirus outbreak a public health emergency that needs an immediate global response to keep the disease from spreading. CGTN's Rebecca Bondon has more from Geneva.
Following a meeting that spanned several hours, the World Health Organization declared the coronavirus outbreak a global health emergency. It said the world had to act together to limit the spread of the virus, particularly given the risk to countries with poor health infrastructure.
We must act now to help countries prepare for that possibility. For all of these reasons, I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern over the global outbreak of novel coronavirus. The main reason for this declaration is not because of what is happening in China, but because of what is happening in other countries. This declaration is not a vote of no confidence in China.
The WHO decided to convene its emergency committee because of the rise in the number of cases of the virus. It has also said that it was deeply concerned because of the evidence of human-to-human transmission outside of China.
The WHO says that almost everyone on the emergency committee agreed with the decision to declare the coronavirus situation a global health emergency. In its last meeting, the organisation opted not to declare the outbreak a global emergency, and that decision was criticised by some commentators.
Although there has been some criticism within China and outside of the country, the WHO continued to praise China's rapid response to the virus and said there would have been many more cases had it not been for the Chinese government taking extraordinary measures.
The speed with which China detected the outbreak, isolated the virus, sequenced the genome, and shared it with WHO and the world are very impressive and beyond words. So is China's commitment to transparency and to supporting other countries. In many ways, China is actually setting a new standard for outbreak response, and it's not an exaggeration.
The WHO is not recommending taking any measures that unnecessarily interfere with international trade or travel. The move to declare the virus a global emergency will help international agencies coordinate efforts to fight the spread of the virus. Rebecca Bondon, CGTN, Geneva.
Let's now turn to the business of sport. The NFL's Showcase game is returning to South Florida for the first time in a decade. The local economy is expected to be the big winner. CGTN's Nitze Soledad Perez tells us more about what Miami hopes to gain from Super Bowl 54.
Can the city of Miami up its game as one of the entertainment meccas of America? The Super Bowl will give the city that chance. And the local economy is expected to be the big winner.
So you're seeing people willing to dish out that money and really take in everything that we have. So from the hotel rooms to what the average person in the Super Bowl spends, which is over $1,000 a day, we're seeing the city come to life.
Local yacht charter company, The Advantage, is welcoming the thousands of visitors already arriving.
We are close to being sold out for Super Bowl weekend. Just got a couple of spots left open. We're actually doing a lot of the events that are being hosted here on the water. So, getting all the guests and VIPs to and from their location without having to actually deal with street traffic.
Hello, folks. How you doing? Welcome to Miami. How you doing today?
The famous Ocean Drive and its restaurants are ready for the party.
On the 31st of December, on the New Year's Eve, we always close the street, make a bigger restaurant. It should be the same this year with the Super Bowl. We're expecting 3 days full of people, happy people, so we expect to do the best we can. So we make Miami be a welcome city again. This year, it should be better.
If last year's Super Bowl in Atlanta is any indication, South Florida can expect a windfall of some $200 million. Getting the Super Bowl to come to Miami didn't come for free. The county, using taxpayers' money, had to pay a $4 million fee to the local football team, the Miami Dolphins, for them to negotiate the agreement with the league. And that's not all. And as much as another $20 million for security, emergency services, infrastructure improvements, and even footing the hotel bill for the football players. For local politicians and those involved in getting the Super Bowl played in Miami, those expenses are more than justified. They claim the real value is in the positive exposure and free advertising that such an event will generate for the region for many years to come. Nitza Soledad Perez, CGTN, Miami.
Let's take a look at what happened in commodities trade. Platinum taking the biggest hit among commodities we have on the board. It was down just over 2%. That could be attributed to the markets wondering where the globe's economy is headed. That could be the same sentiment dampening the price of copper, which is one of the most traded industrial metals. Gold still taking advantage of those market jitters as one of the go-to investments when the markets are bearish, as they are now. Gold was up 0.8%. And that was a look at how the commodities market traded today. Let's take a look at more news making headlines. Rice farming overtakes plantain as the main crop grown in central Uganda. And Kenya Safaricom introduces a cleaner cooking alternative for low-income households.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Well, farmers in Uganda's central region are taking on rice growing to improve their income. It seems a grain crop could also soon substitute other crops being grown in that part of the country, as Leon Sayanga reports on Grassroots tonight.
In the middle of these lavish green fields, Hilary Makinon wades away. He has only been 4 months on this farm, and now he is fully acquainted with rice farming.
I didn't know anything to do with rice farming. I have found all this here, but I am happy. It's something I am happy to do.
Rice was recently introduced to this region. Plantain has been the main crop grown here. Hundreds of rural farmers have turned to these rice fields to learn about growing the crop. And for many, it is already paying off. They say the knowledge acquired is helping them meet their basic needs. Over 1,500 subsistence farmers are working in these fields, others in the processing factory. Makinon earns about $35 every 2 weeks, but he hopes to one day start his own farm.
I have always admired farming. When I saved enough money, I will go back home and grow rice. I now have the technology of doing it.
The rice farm here sits on about 6,000 acres of land. The Chinese owners want to expand even more. They say an outgrower model will open up acres of land for rice farming across the country.
Through our experience, we found out that you can planting daily, harvest daily, process daily, and sell it daily. That means you save a lot of investment and more efficiency through we call agriculture industrialization and modernization.
And it is a farming model that has been embraced by the local authorities.
The new technologies of growing rice being adapted by our people who are now doing it themselves, who are growing rice themselves, is very important because that is technology transfer from those who knew how to grow rice, the Chinese, to our people. Our people now can grow rice by themselves.
Ugandans consume about 300,000 metric tons of rice annually, and the potential for a rice industry keeps growing. And with farmers like Makinon in the rice fields, will be more grain to eat. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Lukaya, Central Uganda.
Well, a Kenyan cooking gas company has stepped up the sector with a clean alternative form of energy. M-Gas offers clean and reliable gas services to low-income households that otherwise use dirty fuels due to high cost of energy forms. CGTN's Vera Ora takes us through how this company is revolutionizing the sector.
In the bustling streets of Mukuru-Kwanjenga, an informal settlement in Nairobi, dusk is setting in, and the tiny tongues of flames pierce through the blackened cooking pots dubbed the jiko. It essentially uses charcoal, which is a major pollutant and driver of deforestation. However, a new company may have found a solution to curb the pollution and still offer a cleaner, cheaper, and more convenient alternative than traditional fuels.
This innovation is very important because it's reducing deforestation around cities in Africa, also improving the health of people cooking with biomass, like mostly women and children, and then how households can afford these fuels and are accessible to them.
M-Gas was launched in January to cater to the low-income market by offering clean cooking alternatives. It also allows customers to pay for gas in small increments.
M-Gas ninaona ikinipeleka mzuri.
I feel M-Gas serves me better as there is no smoke. It cooks my tea faster than when I used to cook using the stove and kerosene. It would take a really long time. Now, only I pay whatever amount that is available to me.
Kulingana na ile uwezo niko nayo, haini cost sana vile tuseme mafuta ama
It doesn't cost me as much as when I used kerosene or charcoal. Mostly I use the stove and I spent 100 shillings daily. And even if I bought 5 liters of kerosene, it would only last me for 1 week and would cost me 600 shillings.
Ilikuwa namaliza only 1 week. Na nilikuwa naitununua na 600.
M-Gas installs the stove, a 13-kilogram gas cylinder and meters in customers' homes for free. This would collectively cost around $80. The smart meters on the tanks mean customers can make small payments. It also alerts the company when the gas is about to run out. A new tank is delivered free of charge. The cost of the stove, the meters and delivery is paid through a small premium on the overall price of the gas, so there is no upfront cost.
The market is massive, so we really want to grow this at scale. We are only here because we want to have a huge impact at scale. So let's see how we go. But if I were a dreamer, and I'm a bit of a dreamer, in a couple of years, some million households in Kenya, some million households in Tanzania, and let's see from where we go from there.
The company hopes to have millions of customers within a few years as it seeks to expand into relative markets like Tanzania and Uganda. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
A Nigerian entrepreneur has created an invention that is set to revolutionize professional car wash setups. The business allows the owner of the car to acquire such services at the comfort of their home or at work. All this courtesy of a caterer turned car wash owner who is seeking to change the face of the business. CGTN's Deji Badmus has his story.
It's not a familiar picture of an occupation that is generally considered as a tough for men. But Bumi Okbakunle is challenging that norm and daring to be different. Most of the attendants are females, just like her. Many things make it stand out from others. From a simple wash to complete exterior and interior detailing, Okpakunle's Banites car wash offers all. She goes to every nook and cranny of the car to make sure it's thoroughly rid of dirt. Women are rarely found in car washing business, but here they're doing the job diligently. Many customers initially found it surprising, but this is Okpakunle's small way of empowering women.
It is new to the environment that I am, but at the same time, I have boys working with me, and as well I have the females who are working with me. Some of them, they are working as apprentices, and some they're actually working, to earn their living.
So far, she's been able to manage the diversity of her workforce. Ultimately, this has helped to boost the image of her business and also change the perception of customers who have gradually warmed up to having their cars washed by women.
They were surprised at first, and also, it took them time for them to really accept me into the business. My workshop is based on hands-on work. So that's what we get done in my workshop. So they don't just see me sitting down, directing, supervising, or, just talking to them or, being in sales. No, I'm with them, doing the job, getting it done with my bare hands, and they like it. So I am accepted by everyone now.
Okpakunle has also introduced an innovation into the car wash business, mobile service, literally taking the car wash to the client. So getting your car washed doesn't have to be a hassle with Banitas. Okpakunle says it's a style she adapted from running a mobile catering service.
You can easily call me or book me ahead and let me come to your offices, to your home, anywhere to come and give you a wash. It makes you to be flexible around your job, so to say. You can be in your office, then I'll be doing your wash. You don't have to get done with the office job and then be thinking, okay, at the end of the day, I have to stop by at the car wash and then get the wash. No, you just call me, be in the comfort of your office, then I'll do the job for you at your comfort.
Okpakunle is getting more customers with her innovation, and she says she plans to continue to introduce more innovations to keep her ahead of her competitors. Things are working out fine for her car wash business, and more women are drawing inspiration from her to challenge some of societal norms. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, time now for us to take a look at the forex market. While the stock market didn't fare well in trade today, the Nigerian Naira and South African Rand both closed in positive territory. The Kenya shilling was slightly weaker, shifting just over 0.1%. And that was a quick look at the forex market. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contact on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. From me, Hannah Viviers, and the rest of the Global Business team, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.